Hello and welcome. I'm Gina Shakespeare. Today on Declassified, full coverage on Joe Biden like you've never seen him before. We shine light on the 2020 hopeful and other Obama officials. So just what exactly did they stand to gain from Ukrainian influence? We break it all down like no other media. You know, sometimes in the comments you talk about rabbit holes. Well, this is an intertwined and complicated network, and we have the map. That's right. Newly released evidence suggests Ukraine played a key role in creating the Trump-Russia collusion narrative at the behest of Obama officials. In the first part of this story, we'll establish all the key players without leaving out anyone, then swiftly move to Victoria Nuland with the grand plan for the Ukrainian leadership. But does it go her way? We find out. The story by our Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson. You can find Carlson on Twitter at The Markets Work. Also, it's a pleasure for me to be sitting here with you, so thank you very much for giving me your time. I plan to make it worthwhile. Back to 2014, here we go. Ukraine underwent dramatic changes in 2014. US Vice President Joe Biden played a critical role in the Obama administration's involvement in the revolution that ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Following the revolution, Biden would use his influence to help force the creation of the troubled National Anti-Corruption Bureau, also known as NABU. Notably, during the 2016 election campaign, information leaked from NABU about Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort that helped to create the false narrative that Trump colluded with Russia to win the election. Biden would also use the threat of withholding $1 billion in US loan guarantees to pressure Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko to fire the prosecutor general. At the time, the prosecutor had been investigating Burisma, a Ukrainian natural gas giant that had appointed Biden's son Hunter as a board member. President Donald Trump's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani recently said, "Keep your eyes on Ukraine." In his own words to the Washington Examiner, Giuliani highlighted the plot to create an investigation of President Trump based on a false charge of conspiracy with the Russians to affect the 2016 elections. But it does not end there. The Obama administration's involvement stretches back to 2014, and we've got proof. On or shortly before February 4th, 2014, Victoria Nuland, you've all heard about her from her involvement in Spygate. She was the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs in the Obama State Department. She actually had a conversation with the US Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt. We know because it was intercepted and leaked. This call was fairly serious. Nuland and Pyatt appeared to be discussing the ouster of Yanukovych and the installation of opposition leader Arseniy Yatsenyuk as Prime Minister. Nuland actually favoured opposition leader Yatsenyuk over the main rivals Vitaly Klitschko and Oleh Jagnigbuk, telling Pyatt, "I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. What he needs is Klitschko and Jagnigbuk on the outside." The conversation didn't end there. Toward the end, then Vice President Biden was discussed as being willing to help cement the changeover in Ukraine. This is not just us saying it. This is what they actually said word for word. Jeffrey Pyatt said, "We want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. The other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place." Victoria Nuland then said, "So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick so Biden's willing." And then it all came together. Nuland and Pyatt met with Ukrainian opposition leaders Klitschko and Yatsenyuk, along with then-President Yanukovych, just days later on February 7th, 2014. Events then moved swiftly. Without a single delay, it all fell into place. On February 22nd, 2014, Yanukovych was removed as president of Ukraine and fled to Russia. Then, just 5 days later, on February 27th, 2014, Yatsenyuk, the candidate favoured by Nuland, was installed as Prime Minister of Ukraine. Klitschko was left out, and notably, Yatsenyuk would later resign in April 2016 amid corruption accusations. So where does Biden's involvement in Ukraine come into this? Well, let's roll out the finest of details, including that $50 million and that $17.5 billion package. Oh, and his son's involvement. Here we go. It all began in April. Biden would get personally involved, as would his son Hunter. On April 18th, 2014, Hunter Biden was appointed to the board of directors for Burisma. Now, Burisma is no small company. It's one of the largest national gas companies in Ukraine. Just 4 days later, on April 22nd, 2014, Vice President Biden traveled to Ukraine, offering his political support and $50 million in aid for Yatsenyuk's new government that was very shaky at that time. Poroshenko, a billionaire politician, was elected as president of Ukraine on May 25th, 2014. Biden actually became close to both men and helped Ukraine obtain a 4-year $17.5 billion IMF package in March of 2015. Finally, in October 2016, Foreign Policy wrote a lengthy article. What will Ukraine do without Uncle Joe? Actually, on a side note here, President Trump just nicknamed him Sleepy Creepy Uncle Joe. Just FYI, just making sure you're still with me because we are digging deep today and I need you to hang on every detail. So Foreign Policy basically described Biden's role in the removal of Ukraine's general prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. Shokin, the choice of Poroshenko, was portrayed as fumbling a major corruption case and hindering an investigation into 2 high-ranking prosecutors arrested on corruption charges. At this point, the United States pushed for Shokin's removal, and Biden led the effort by personally threatening to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees. Let's hear it in his own words. This was in an interview with The Atlantic. Biden recalled telling Poroshenko, "Petro, you're not going to get your $1 billion. It's okay. You can keep the prosecutor general. Just understand we're not paying if you do." But the damage at that point was actually done. That's correct. Shokin was removed by Poroshenko shortly thereafter in early 2016. But according to reporting by The Hill, at the time of his firing, Shokin had been investigating Burisma. Shokin's investigation into Burisma had previously been disclosed in June 2017 by Front News International. And this is where the details get really fine. Who owns Burisma? It's owned by Nikolai Shlodzyevsky, the former Minister of Ecology for Ukraine. According to Front News, Shlodzyevsky issued a special permit for the extraction of a third of the gas produced in Ukraine to his own company, Burisma. According to the Ukrainian non-profit Anti-Corruption Action Center, Shlodzyevsky owns 38 permits held by 14 companies, with Burisma accounting for the majority with 33 of the permits. Shlodzyevsky left Ukraine after Yanukovych fled to Russia during the Ukrainian Revolution known as Euromaidan. So next, an investigation into Burisma, and stick with me because soon after that, we're going to outline Paul Manafort's involvement. In the spring of 2014, the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's Office opened an investigation at the behest of the UK Prosecutor's Office, which was investigating money laundering allegations against Shlodzyevsky and had frozen $23.5 million in assets allegedly belonging to him in early April 2014. Shokin, who wasn't appointed as general prosecutor until February 2015, wasn't yet involved in the case. Ukrainian prosecutors refused to provide the UK with needed documents, and in January 2015, a British court ordered the assets unfrozen. This action was pointedly called out in a speech by Pyatt, who stated, "In the case of former Ecology Minister Mykola Shlodzyevsky, the UK authorities had seized $23 million in illicit assets that belonged to the Ukrainian people. Instead of receiving cooperation from Ukrainian prosecutors, they sent letters to Shlodzyevsky's attorneys attesting that there was no case against him. As a result, result, the money was freed by the UK court, and shortly thereafter the money was moved to Cyprus. On February 10, 2015, Shokin was appointed Prosecutor General of Ukraine, and he picked up the investigation into Burisma, which reportedly continued until his formal resignation in February of 2016. Now, this is where Hunter Biden comes a little more into the picture. Around the same time that Zlochevsky's assets were being frozen in the UK, Burisma appointed Hunter Biden to its board on April 18, 2014. Hunter's compensation had never been disclosed by Burisma, which is a private company, but Ryan Tui, a Burisma spokesperson, told the New York Times that Biden's compensation was not out of the ordinary for similar board positions. However, according to The Hill's reporting, Hunter Biden's firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners, was receiving regular payments, usually more than $166,000 a month, from Burisma. The payments ran from the spring of 2014 through the fall of 2015 and reportedly totaled more than $3 million. The Hill article included a written answer from Shokin, who told Solomon that his investigation into Burisma had included plans for interrogations and other crime investigation procedures into all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. According to Ukrainian Prosecutor General Yuri Lutsenko, following Shokin's forced dismissal, the Burisma investigation was transferred to Sitnik's NABU. Just a reminder, that's the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, which then reportedly closed the investigation sometime in 2016. The Kiev Post on March 27th published an editorial written by 3 members of the Anti-Corruption Action Center in Kiev that disputed Lutsenko's interview with The Hill. They claim that 2 cases relating to Burisma are still being investigated by NABU. As you can probably notice from what we've outlined so far, the politics within Ukraine are extremely complicated and corruption is endemic, often leading to conflicting accounts of events. Okay, so Mr. Manafort, here we come. That's right, a little more familiar territory here. This is where the US pressure to investigate Manafort begins. Yes, in January 2018, top Ukrainian corruption prosecutors and officials from Obama's National Security Council, FBI, State Department, and Department of Justice met in Washington. That's according to an April 26th article by The Hill. The meeting, which was reportedly billed as training, apparently also touched on 2 other matters: the revival of a closed investigation into payments to US figures from Ukraine's Russia-backed Party of Regions, and the closure of an ongoing Ukrainian investigation into Burisma. According to The Hill's reporting, the Ukrainian embassy confirmed that meetings were held, but said it had no record that the Party of Regions or Burisma cases came up in the meetings. A January 22, 2016 NABU press release actually confirmed that NABU Director Artem Sitnik was in Washington from January 19th to the 21st. At the same time as the NABU meeting with Obama officials, Vice President Biden also met with senior Ukrainian officials. On January 21, 2016, Biden met with Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine. According to the White House release, the 2 leaders agreed to continue to move forward on Ukraine's anti-corruption agenda. Just 6 days earlier, on January 15, 2016, Biden had met with Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Grozman, promising to commit $220 million in new assistance to Ukraine that year. Notably, several months later, Sitnik and Ukrainian Member of Parliament Sergei Lishchenko would publicly disclose the contents of the Ukrainian Black Ledger to the media, which implicated Trump's campaign manager Paul Manafort. The revelation would force Manafort from the campaign. Lishchenko also served as a source for various individuals, including journalist Michael Isakoff and Democratic National Committee operative Alexandra Chalupa. In addition, Lishchenko served as a direct source of information for Fusion GPS and its researcher, former CIA contractor Nellie Orr. Another Ukrainian-related meeting also took place in January 2016 when Chalupa, a Ukrainian-American, informed an unknown senior DNC official that she believed there was a Russian connection with the Trump campaign. Notably, this theme would be picked up by the Clinton campaign in the summer of 2016. Chalupa also told the official to expect Manafort's involvement in the Trump campaign. How Chalupa knew to expect Manafort's involvement in the Trump campaign in January still remains unknown, but her forecast provided a prescient as Manafort reached out to the Trump campaign shortly after. That was on February 29, 2016, through a mutual acquaintance, Thomas J. Barack Jr. According to Manafort, he and Trump hadn't been in communication for years until the Trump campaign responded to Manafort's offer. As the Epoch Times previously reported on May 30th, 2016, Fusion GPS contractor Nellie Orr sent an email to her husband, high-ranking DOJ official Bruce Orr, and 3 other DOJ officials to alert them of the discovery of the reported trove of documents on Ukrainian Party of Region's black cash box. It was this discovery that led to Manafort's resignation from the Trump campaign in August 2016. That same month, the New York Times published an article alleging that payments to Manafort had been uncovered from the Party of Regents black box, the 400-page handwritten ledger released by Lishchenko. The article proved to be a fatal blow for Manafort, who resigned from the Trump campaign just days later. So what were the ties between NABU and the FBI? We tell you everything. Following the successful overthrow of Yanukovych, Joe Biden had a direct hand in the formation of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, as he personally pushed for the creation of an independent anti-corruption bureau to combat graft. This was according to an article by Foreign Policy. Interestingly, NABU was formally established in October 2014 in response to pressure from not only the US State Department and Biden, but also the International Monetary Fund and the European Commission. Despite the international push, the fledgling anti-corruption unit took more than a year to actually become a functioning unit. During this time, NABU officials began establishing a relationship with the FBI. In early 2016, NABU Director Sitnik announced that his bureau was very close to signing a memorandum of cooperation with the FBI, and by February 2016, the FBI had had a permanent representative on site at the NABU offices. On June 5, 2016, Sitnik met with US Ambassador Pyatt to discuss a more formalized relationship with the FBI, and on June 30, 2016, NABU and the FBI entered into a memorandum of understanding that allowed for an FBI office on site at NABU offices to focus on international money laundering cases. The relationship was renewed for an additional 2 years in June 2017. Interestingly, NABU has repeatedly refused to make the Memorandum of Understanding with the FBI public and went to court in 2018 to prevent its release. Sitnik, along with parliamentarian Lishchenko, became the subject of an investigation in Ukraine, and in December 2018, a Kiev court ruled that both men acted illegally when they revealed that Manafort's surname and signature were found in the so-called Black Ledger of ousted President Viktor Yanukovych's Party of Regions. The Kiev Post reported that on December 12th of 2018. The court noted the material was part of a pre-trial investigation, and its release led to interference in the electoral process of the United States in 2016 and harmed the interests of Ukraine as a state. Lishchenko had publicly adopted a strong anti-Trump stance, telling the Financial Times in August 2016 that a Trump presidency would change the pro-Ukrainian agenda in American foreign policy, and that it was important to show not only the corruption aspect, but that he is a pro-Russian candidate who can break the geopolitical balance in the world. Lishchenko noted that the majority of Ukrainian politicians were on Hillary Clinton's side. In December 2017, Ukrainian Prosecutor General Lutsenko accused Sitnik of allowing the FBI to conduct illegal operations in Ukraine, claiming that the US law enforcers were allegedly invited without the permission required and in breach of the necessary procedures. Lutsenko continued by asking who actually let the Foreign Special Service act in Ukraine. Taras Chernovyl, a Ukrainian political analyst, also questioned the FBI's activities, writing that some kind of undercover operations are being conducted in Ukraine with direct participation or even under control of the FBI. This means the FBI operatives could have access to classified data or confidential information. And finally today, Pinchuk's ties to Lishchenko and the Clintons. On April 11th, 2019, Greg Craig, Obama's former White House counsel, was indicted for lying about and concealing his work in Ukraine. Craig, who reportedly worked closely with Manafort, was paid more than $4 million to produce an independent report justifying Ukraine's trial and conviction of the former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko. Notably, Craig's name was not included in the Black Ledger leak from Lishchenko and Sitnik. The indictment notes that a wealthy private Ukrainian was fully funding the report. In a recent YouTube video, Craig publicly stated that it was Doug Schoen who brought the project to me, and he told me he was acting on behalf of Viktor Pinchuk, who was a pro-Western Ukrainian businessman who helped to fund the project. Skadden wrote in a recent FARA filing, the firm understood that its work was to be largely funded by Viktor Pinchuk. Pinchuk put out a statement on January 21st denying any financial involvement. Pinchuk is the founder of Interpipe, a steel pipe manufacturer. He owns Credit Dnipro Bank, several ferroalloy plants and a media empire. He is married to Alina Pinchuk, the daughter of former Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma. Pinchuk has been accused of profiting immensely from the purchase of state-owned assets at severely below-market prices through political favoritism. Between April 4th and April 12th, 2016, Ukrainian parliamentarian Olga Bielkova had 4 meetings with Samuel Charap, Liz Zentos, Michael Kimmage and David Kramer. FARA documents filed by Schoen showed that he was paid $40,000 a month by Pinchuk, in part to arrange these meetings. Schoen attempted to arrange another 72 meetings with congressmen and media. It is unknown how many of these meetings, if any, took place. Schoen also helped Pinchuk establish ties with the Clinton Foundation. The Wall Street Journal reported on March 19, 2015, how Schoen connected Pinchuk with senior Clinton State Department staffers in order to pressure former Ukrainian President Yanukovych to release Tymoshenko, a political rival of Yanukovych, from jail. And the relationship between Pinchuk and the Clintons continued. Clinton and her husband Bill, the 42nd US president, have been paid speakers at the annual Yes and other Pinchuk events. They describe themselves as friends of Pinchuk, who is known internationally as a businessman and philanthropist. Although exact numbers aren't clear, reports filed by the Clinton Foundation indicate that as much as $25 million of Pinchuk's donations went to the Clinton organization. Pinchuk also has ties to Lishchenko, the Ukrainian MP who leaked the information on Manafort. Lishchenko has been a frequent speaker at the Ukrainian Breakfast, a traditional private event held at Davos, Switzerland, and hosted by the Viktor Pinchuk Foundation, and has also been pictured with Pinchuk at multiple other events. Thank you very much for joining me me on this episode of Declassified. I do trust you've enjoyed it. What are your thoughts on Biden and the Obama officials' ties to Ukraine? Thank you for commenting, also giving this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribing to Declassified. From all of us here, take care, and we'll see you very soon.